My uncle mocked my worn-out coat at Thanksgiving, predicting I'd beg for leftovers, while my sister laughed along. But when her new boyfriend walked in, saw me, and dropped his phone in sheer terror, my trap finally slammed shut. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The thermometer on my bedside table read 102.4 degrees, but the violent shivering that racked my body had very little to do with the flu. I lay there in the dim light of my modest, one-bedroom apartment, pulling the heavy, faded quilt tighter around my shoulders, trying to find some semblance of warmth. The air in the room was thick and heavy, smelling faintly of the peppermint tea that had gone cold on the nightstand hours ago. My head throbbed with a relentless, rhythmic pounding, each beat echoing the harsh reality of the words I had just heard through the receiver of my phone. It was a Tuesday afternoon, raining heavily, the droplets striking my window pane like tiny, insistent fingers demanding my attention. I had been fading in and out of a feverish sleep when the shrill ringtone shattered the silence. I had reached for it blindly, my hand shaking, expecting a routine check-in from my younger sister, Bella. We had always been close, or so I thought. We were the only two left of our immediate family, a bond forged in the fires of early tragedy. But the voice on the other end of the line hadn't carried the warmth of a sisterly check-in. It was clipped, cold, and devastatingly businesslike. "Adeline, I need to let you know that I've signed the power of attorney over to Uncle Logan," Bella had said, her voice completely devoid of emotion, sounding more like a pre-recorded message than the sibling I had practically raised. "He's going to manage the estate and the sale of the family home. He explained everything to me. He said you just aren't equipped to handle this kind of financial responsibility, given your situation." I had pressed the phone harder against my ear, desperate to ensure I wasn't hallucinating from the fever. "My situation? Bella, what are you talking about? Mom and Dad's house is half mine. We agreed we were going to rent it out, keep it in the family. We sat at the kitchen table and promised each other." "Uncle Logan said that was a naive, childish plan," Bella replied, and I could hear the faint rustle of papers in the background. "He said you're barely scraping by in your little IT support job, Adeline. You drive a 12-year-old car. You buy your clothes at discount stores. He said if we leave the house in your hands, or even half in your control, you'll end up bankrupting the estate to pay your own bills. He's liquidating it. The funds will be put into a trust that he manages. You'll get a small monthly allowance. It's for your own good. Aunt Margaret agrees." The room had started to spin. The oxygen seemed to vanish from the air. This wasn't just about a house. It was the ultimate erasure of my sacrifices. It was a hostile takeover of our family legacy, orchestrated by the very people who had watched me give up my youth to keep Bella safe. I tried to speak, to argue, but the cough seized my lungs, a deep, rattling sound that forced me to double over in my bed. "I have to go, Adeline," Bella had said, her tone devoid of any sympathy for my obvious physical distress. "Uncle Logan is taking me out to celebrate my new position. I'll text you when the first allowance check is mailed. Take some aspirin." The line had gone dead. The click of the disconnection echoed in the quiet room, a sound so final and absolute that it felt like a physical blow to my chest. I stared at the darkened screen of my phone, the device heavy in my trembling hand. The fever raged on, cooking my skin, but deep inside my chest, an icy, expanding void began to take hold. I had spent 10 years protecting her, shielding her from the harsh realities of the world, only for her to hand the keys to our lives over to a vulture in a tailored suit. The theft of my childhood home was agonizing, but the theft of my sister's loyalty was a sickness no medicine could cure. The immediate aftermath of the phone call was a blur of physical agony and emotional paralysis. I spent the next 24 hours trapped in a vicious cycle of fever dreams and waking nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Bella's face, not as the bright-eyed child I had nurtured, but wearing the same condescending, tight-lipped smirk that Aunt Margaret had perfected over decades. I forced myself out of bed on Wednesday morning, my legs feeling like lead, my throat raw and burning. I needed water, I needed clarity. I needed to look my sister in the eye. I didn't have the strength to drive, and a rideshare would take too long. I simply waited. I knew their patterns, I knew tea. Aunt Margaret couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat under the guise of checking in on her poor, sickly, impoverished niece. Sure enough, by early afternoon, the sharp, impatient knock on my apartment door signaled their arrival. I pulled my oversized, faded gray cardigan tightly around my shoulders and dragged my feet to the door. When I opened it, the contrast was violently jarring. There stood Aunt Margaret, draped in a heavy, ostentatious cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair sprayed into a rigid, unmoving helmet of perfection. Beside her stood Bella, looking uncomfortably chic in a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford on her own. The heavy, suffocating scent of Margaret's expensive floral perfume immediately invaded my small hallway, masking the comforting smell of my peppermint tea. "Oh, Adeline, look at you," Margaret sighed, her voice dripping with pity as her eyes raked over my pale face, my messy hair, and my mismatched pajamas. She stepped inside without an invitation, her high heels clicking loudly against my cheap laminate flooring. "You look absolutely dreadful. This is exactly what Logan was talking about. You simply cannot take care of yourself, let alone an entire estate." Bella stepped in behind her, refusing to meet my eyes. She looked anywhere but at me, studying the slight water stain on the ceiling, the pile of mail on the counter, the worn fabric of my second-hand sofa. "Bella," I rasped, my voice sounding weak and gravelly. "Please tell me this is a joke. Tell me you didn't actually sign the papers over to Logan." Bella finally looked at me, but her eyes were guarded hard. "It's not a joke, Adeline, it's done. Logan filed everything this morning. The house goes on the market next week." "He's stealing from us," I said, leaning against the wall for support as a wave of dizziness washed over me. "He has always wanted that property. He's manipulating you." "Stop being so dramatic," Aunt Margaret snapped, walking over to my tiny kitchen and peering into my nearly empty refrigerator with a look of profound disgust. "Logan is a professional. He knows how wealth management works. Something you clearly know nothing about, Adeline. Look at how you live. You've been working that same dead-end computer job for years, and you have absolutely nothing to show for it. Bella is finally stepping into the real world, associating with successful people. You should be grateful Logan is willing to handle the burden so you don't end up homeless." I looked at Bella, silently pleading with her to defend me, to remember the nights I stayed up helping her with homework, the double shifts I worked to pay for her braces, the holidays I spent exhausted so she could have a normal childhood. But Bella just crossed her arms and lifted her chin, mimicking Margaret's posture. "Logan is introducing me to Theo's parents tonight," Bella said, her voice strained but defensive. "They are very important people in the tech industry. I need to focus on my future, Adeline, not dragging out the past." "So I'm the past now," I whispered, the words scraping against my raw throat. "You're just stuck, Adeline," Bella said, finally turning her back on me and stepping toward the door. "I'm sorry you're sick. The first allowance check will clear next month." As they walked out the door, leaving me standing alone in the quiet, dusty air of my hallway, Aunt Margaret paused, casting one final, triumphant look back at my meager surroundings. They walked away acting as though I were a charity case, a pathetic, helpless creature who had finally been put in her place. I closed the door slowly, leaning my forehead against the cool wood as another coughing fit racked my body. I let them believe it. I let them think they had outsmarted the poor, struggling, unremarkable sister. But as I walked back to my bedroom and opened the secret, encrypted laptop hidden beneath my floorboards, a strange, profound calm settled over my fevered brain. They thought they had won, but they had forgotten one crucial thing. To understand the depth of Uncle Logan and Aunt Margaret's delusion, you have to understand the decade of deliberate deception I had orchestrated. 10 years ago, the world as Bella and I knew it ended in the screech of tires and the shattering of glass. A drunk driver took our parents from us on a rainy November night. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in computer science. Bella was barely 12, terrified and clinging to me like a lifeline. The grief was paralyzing, but the immediate reality was worse. Our parents had left behind a beautiful, sprawling Victorian home that had been in the family for generations, but very little liquid cash. Almost instantly, Uncle Logan had swooped in, smelling an opportunity. Logan was my father's younger brother, a man who constructed his entire identity around the illusion of extreme wealth. He called himself an independent Rivate equity consultant. In reality, he was a glorified gambler, moving money around in increasingly desperate, high-risk ventures, constantly chasing a massive payout that never materialized. He wore flashy, slightly outdated Italian suits, sported a heavy gold watch that I highly suspected was a replica, and spoke in aggressive, corporate buzzwords that meant absolutely nothing. Aunt Margaret was his perfect mirror, a woman whose self-worth was entirely dictated by zip codes, brand names, and country club gossip. In the weeks following the funeral, Logan had tried relentlessly to get me to hand over the deed to the house, claiming he could leverage the equity to set up a trust for Bella. I wasn't financially sophisticated back then, but I was fiercely protective. I saw the hungry, desperate look in his eyes when he evaluated the antique furniture or paced the acreage of the backyard. I refused him. I locked the house down, legally binding it so that neither of us could sell without the other's consent until Bella turned 25. Logan never forgave me for that. From that moment on, I became his target. To keep Bella in her private school, to keep the lights on and the property taxes paid, I had to work. I took a low-level, grueling job doing IT support for a local hospital during the day, and I tutored math at night. I wore thrift store clothes until they fell apart. I drove a battered Honda that rattled when it went over 40 miles an hour. I made myself small, insignificant, and outwardly poor so that Bella could have everything. But Margaret and Logan used my sacrifice as a weapon. At every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every graduation, they made me the punchline. "Adeline, darling, still wearing that same awful sweater?" Margaret would loudly sigh across the dinner table. "I suppose we should pack up some extra turkey for you to take home. Heaven knows you probably survive on instant ramen." Logan would swirl his scotch, looking at me with undisguised contempt. "If you had just listened to me, Adeline, you wouldn't be working in a basement fixing computers. It's embarrassing, frankly. You have no ambition. You're dragging the family name through the mud." They relentlessly poisoned Bella's mind over the years. They showered her with cheap gifts and expensive dinners they put on credit cards, convincing her that my frugality was a personal failing, a sign of incompetence rather than a desperate shield protecting her inheritance. They groomed her to view them as her true guardians, the arbiters of success and class, while I was simply the pathetic, struggling roommate she had outgrown. But what Logan, Margaret, and eventually Bella never knew was what I did during the hours between midnight and 4:00 a.m. While they slept, comfortably secure in their superiority, I coded. I built a predictive algorithm for logistics management that solved a massive inefficiency in supply chain distribution. I worked in total secrecy, paranoid that if Logan smelled money, he would find a way to bleed me dry and use Bella as leverage to do it. 3 years ago, I sold the platform to a major tech conglomerate. The payout wasn't just large, it was generational wealth. I immediately pivoted, using the capital to establish myself as an anonymous angel investor, operating through a labyrinth of blind trusts and LLCs. In the tech world, my pseudonym was highly respected and deeply feared. I funded startups. I destroyed competitors. I wielded power that Logan couldn't even comprehend in his wildest, scotch-soaked dreams. But in my real life, I kept driving the rattling Honda. I kept wearing the faded cardigans. I continued the IT job part-time just to maintain the cover. I wanted to wait until Bella's 25th birthday, just a few months away, to reveal the truth, to show her that the house was safe, her future was secure, and she never had to worry again. Instead, Logan had manipulated her fear. He had convinced her that my poverty was about to bankrupt the estate, manipulating her into breaking the legal agreement early on a technicality of guardianship. He thought he was stealing a house from a helpless help desk worker. He had absolutely no idea that he had just declared war on a ghost who owned the very industry his new protege was trying to break into. The fever broke somewhere around 3 a.m, leaving me drenched in cold sweat but with a mind sharper than a freshly honed razor. The paralyzing grief and physical weakness that had bound me to my mattress for the past 2 days evaporated, replaced entirely by a quiet, calculating fury. I pushed the heavy quilt aside, my bare feet hitting the cold laminate floor with deliberate force. I didn't bother turning on the main overhead light. The ambient, orange glow from the street lamp outside, my window provided enough illumination for what I needed to do. I walked over to the modest, wobbly wooden desk tucked into the corner of my bedroom. To Auntie Margaret and Bella, it looked like a dumping ground for junk mail and old IT manuals. I reached underneath the bottom drawer, feeling for the hidden biometric latch I had installed myself. With a soft click, a false bottom dropped away, revealing a sleek, matte black laptop that cost more than my car. I pulled it out, placed it on the desk, and pressed my thumb to the scanner. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh, blue light across my face. I bypassed the standard operating system and booted directly into an encrypted, multi-layered private network. It was time to stop playing the victim. If Uncle Logan wanted to play a game of financial ruin, he was about to discover he had challenged the house, and the house always wins. I opened a secure communication channel and dialed a number that was not saved in my contacts. The line rang exactly twice before a crisp, wide-awake voice answered, despite the hour. "Good morning, Adeline," Marcus said. Marcus was my lead corporate attorney, a man whose billable hours could bankrupt a small country, and the only person who knew the full, unvarnished truth about my dual life. "I didn't expect to hear from you until the quarterly review next week. Has something happened?" "Marcus, I need you to initiate a deep, unrestricted financial sweep," I said, my voice steady, the lingering rawness in my throat the only sign I had been ill. "I need everything you can find on Logan Mitchell and his wife, Margaret. I want every bank statement, every shell company, every line of credit, and every outstanding debt pulled from the shadows by sunrise." There was a brief pause on the other end, the sound of a leather chair creaking as Marcus leaned forward. "Logan, your uncle, the one you've been protecting your sister from, did he finally cross the line?" "He convinced Bella to sign over her power of attorney," I explained, pulling up a secondary monitor to begin my own data scraping. "He filed the paperwork yesterday. He's liquidating my parents' estate, claiming I'm financially incompetent. He intends to put the proceeds into a trust under his control." Marcus let out a low, humorless whistle. "That is incredibly brazen and incredibly stupid. Shall I freeze his assets immediately? I can have an injunction filed before the courts open, citing elder fraud, or in this case, sibling fraud and undue influence." "No," I said firmly, my eyes scanning the preliminary data scrolling across my screen. "Not yet. I want him to feel perfectly safe. I want him to think he has one. But I need you to verify the status of the holding company we set up 5 years ago. The one we used to buy up distressed suburban mortgages." "The Oakfield Trust," Marcus confirmed, the sound of rapid typing echoing through the phone. "Yes, I have it right here. What specifically are we looking for?" 5 years ago, Logan was facing foreclosure on that ridiculous, ostentatious mansion he and Margaret parade around in, I said, a cold smile touching the corners of my mouth. He was drowning in debt from a failed commercial real estate venture. I used the Oakfield Trust to quietly purchase the debt from his primary lender. "I hold the mortgage to his house, Marcus. I am his bank. I need to know exactly how many payments he has missed this year." "Pulling the ledger now," Marcus said. "Well, look at this. He has missed the last 4 consecutive payments. The grace period expired 72 hours ago. You have the legal right to initiate foreclosure proceedings immediately, Adeline. He's entirely underwater." "Draft the foreclosure notice?" I instructed, my heart beating with a steady, drum-like rhythm. But do not serve it. Hold it in escrow until I give the word. Now, one more thing. Bella mentioned Logan is introducing her to her new boyfriend's parents. The boyfriend's name is Theo. Look into any young tech founders named Theo in the metro area seeking Series A funding. Logan is a parasite. He wouldn't be interested in this boy unless there was money to be siphoned. 10 minutes later, Marcus sent a dossier to my encrypted inbox. I opened it and couldn't help but laugh, a harsh, dry sound in the quiet apartment. Theo was the CEO of a promising data compression startup, and according to his pitch deck, he was actively seeking a $2 million angel investment. He was scheduled to pitch to my venture capital firm on Monday. Logan had no idea. He was trying to use my parents' house as collateral to buy his way into a deal that I exclusively controlled. The trap was set. Now, it was time to spring it. By Thursday afternoon, I had swapped my pajamas for jeans and a plain black sweater. I felt entirely physically recovered, fueled by pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I climbed into my rattling Honda, the engine sputtering in protest before roaring to life, and drove across town to the leafy, quiet suburban street where I had grown up. The family home, a beautiful 2-story Victorian with a wraparound Poe. RCH sat proudly behind a row of ancient oak trees. Parked in the driveway was Uncle Logan's leased Mercedes, and beside it, a sleek black sedan that practically screamed, "Real estate appraiser." I parked my dusty Honda right behind Logan's bumper, intentionally blocking him in, and walked up the front steps. I didn't bother knocking. I turned my key in the lock and pushed the heavy oak door open. The immediate scent of my mother's favorite lavender polish mixed with the stale, metallic smell of the house being locked up for too long hit my senses. I followed the sound of voices into the formal dining room. Logan was standing by the large bay window, gesturing expansively with his hands while wearing a perfectly tailored, navy blue suit. Margaret stood beside him, her arms crossed, nodding approvingly. A nervous-looking man with a clipboard was measuring the baseboards, and sitting at the long mahogany table, looking incredibly small and uncomfortable, was Bella. "The crown molding alone should add significant value to your appraisal, Mr. Higgins," Logan was saying, his voice booming with fake authority. "We are looking for an expedited sale. Cash buyers preferred. We need this liquidated and placed into my management portfolio by the end of the month." "You aren't selling anything, Logan," I said, my voice echoing clearly against the hardwood floors. All 4 heads snapped toward me. Bella's eyes widened in shock, while Margaret let out a loud, theatrical gasp, clutching the pearls at her throat. Logan's jovial, authoritative demeanor vanished in an instant, replaced by a dark, furious scowl. His face flushed a deep, mottled red as he took a step toward me. "Adeline," Logan barked, his voice dropping an octave into a menacing growl. "What are you doing here? You are trespassing. Bella has given me full legal authority over this property. You need to leave right now, before I call the authorities and have you removed." "This is my house, Logan," I replied calmly, stepping fully into the room, refusing to shrink back. "My name is on the original deed. You manipulated a grieving 24-year-old into signing a piece of paper she didn't understand. But that doesn't matter, because I'm not here to talk to you. I'm here to talk to Bella." I turned my gaze to my sister. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders tense. "Bella," I said softly, but loud enough for the room to hear, "do you know why Logan wants to sell this house so quickly? Did he tell you it was to protect you from my financial incompetence?" "Adeline, please stop," Bella whispered, refusing to look up. "He's trying to help us. He's a wealth manager. He knows what he's doing." "He is a fraud, Bella," I stated flatly, ignoring the furious sputtering coming from Margaret. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a heavily redacted but highly official document Marcus had prepared. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Look at that. Logan doesn't manage wealth. He manages debt. His own. He currently has 6 active tax liens against him from the IRS. He is completely broke." "You lying, jealous little wretch?" Margaret shrieked, her perfectly manicured hands trembling with rage. She lunged forward, trying to snatch the paper from the table, but I slammed my hand down on it first, holding it firmly in place. Don't you listen to her, Bella. Adeline has always been severely mentally unstable. She's having a breakdown because she can't handle the fact that you are moving on to a better life without her. Logan marched over, his chest puffed out, attempting to physically intimidate me by invading my personal space. I could smell the stale coffee and expensive cologne radiating off him. I will not have you defaming me in front of professionals, he yelled, pointing a thick, shaking finger inches from my nose. That document is a forgery. You typed that up in your pathetic little basement office to ruin this family. You are sick, Adeline, sick and pathetic. If it's a forgery, Logan, then let Bella read it, I challenged, not blinking, not breaking eye contact with his furious, panicked eyes. Let her read the court docket numbers. Let her look them up on her phone right now. It's public record. Bella finally looked down at the paper. I watched her eyes track back and forth across the bold, black text outlining the severe financial penalties and the words, notice of delinquency. Her breath hitched. The illusion was cracking, but the years of manipulation were a heavy armor to pierce. Logan, Bella asked, her voice wavering, looking up at him with tears welling in her eyes. Is this true? Are you in trouble with the IRS? Logan stammered, his confident facade shattering into a million pathetic pieces. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. It's a temporary cash flow restructuring, Bella. It's high-level corporate finance. You wouldn't understand, and this uneducated IT worker certainly doesn't understand. We are leaving. Margaret, get Bella's coat. Margaret grabbed Bella by the arm, her grip harsh and frantic, pulling her up from the chair. We are leaving this toxic environment immediately. Come, Bella, don't let her infect you with her jealousy. Bella allowed herself to be pulled away, but as she walked out the front door, she cast one long, confused, and heartbroken look back at me. I stood alone in the dining room, listening to the heavy front door slam shut. The real estate appraiser awkwardly cleared his throat, slowly backing out of the room. I smiled to myself, the cold fire in my chest burning brighter. The first blow had landed. Logan was bleeding, and he was about to get desperate. The desperation I anticipated materialized faster than I could have ever predicted. By Friday morning, my phone was exploding with notifications. Logan, clearly panicked that his source of emergency funding was slipping through his fingers, attempted to go on the offensive. Marcus called me at 9:00 a.m. sharp. He's trying to move fast, Adeline, Marcus reported, his voice tinged with professional amusement. Logan's attorney, a bargain bin lawyer who clearly hasn't looked at the underlying deed structure, just filed an emergency motion to expedite the sale of the house, claiming you are a hostile, estranged tenant causing property damage. And, I asked, pouring myself a cup of dark roast coffee in my small kitchen. And I crushed it before the judge even had his morning coffee, Marcus laughed. I filed an immediate counterinjunction, burying them in so much foundational red tape regarding the original trust language that they won't be able to legally sell a doorknob off that house for the next 3 years. But that's not the best part. Tell me, I said, leaning against the counter. I finished the deep dive on his connection to Theo, the tech kid, Marcus continued, his tone turning serious. Logan isn't just trying to pay off his tax liens, he is actively committing fraud. Logan convinced Theo that he has deep connections to Apex Ventures, which, as we know, is your primary investment vehicle. Logan promised to secure Theo a $2 million angel investment. In exchange, Theo signed a preliminary contract giving Logan a 15% equity stake in his startup as a finder's fee. Logan is planning to use the cash from your house sale to show Theo he has liquid capital to bridge the investment. Disgust curled in my stomach. Logan wasn't just stealing from his family, he was destroying a young entrepreneur's future to line his own empty pockets. Marcus, compile all of this. The fraudulent contract, the exact details of his tax liens, and print the Oakfield Trust mortgage documents showing he is in default on his own home. Send it to me by courier. Today. By late afternoon, I had a thick, heavily bound manila folder sitting on my coffee table. I texted Bella. I didn't ask, I demanded. Meet me at the Elm Street Cafe in 20 minutes. Come alone. If you don't, I will send these documents directly to Theo. I knew threatening to expose things to her new boyfriend was the only leverage that would cut through Margaret's brainwashing. 25 minutes later, Bella walked into the quiet, dimly lit cafe. She looked exhausted. The dark circles under her eyes mirrored my own from earlier in the week. She sat down in the booth across from me, keeping her coat zipped up tight, her body language completely defensive. "What do you want, Adeline?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Logan said you forged that paper yesterday. He said you hired someone online to make it look real because you're obsessed with destroying him." "Bella, stop talking and listen to me," I said, my voice gentle but unyielding. I slid the thick manila folder across the worn wooden table. "I didn't forge anything, and I'm not asking you to take my word for it anymore. I brought proof, real, undeniable proof. Open it." Bella stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she flipped it open. I walked her through it, piece by piece. I didn't yell. I didn't sound angry. I just laid out the facts. "Page 1, I pointed. "These are the official court filings for Logan's last 3 business ventures, all bankruptcies, all involving missing client funds. Page 4. This is the contract he made Theo sign. He is extorting your boyfriend, Bella. He promised Theo an introduction to a venture capital firm he has absolutely zero connection to, and he's stealing 15% of Theo's life's work to do it." "No," Bella whispered, tears finally spilling over her eyelashes, dropping onto the pristine legal paper. "No, Theo said Logan was helping him. Theo said Logan knew the CEO of Apex Ventures." "Logan doesn't know anyone at Apex," I stated firmly. "He is using the sale of our parents' house to fake his wealth to Theo. He is using you, Bella. He has always used you." Bella buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were just failing at life? Margaret said you were lazy. She said you didn't care about our future." "I let them think I was poor so they would leave me alone, and so they couldn't touch the house," I said, reaching across the table and gently pulling her hands away from her face. "I took the hits so you wouldn't have to, but Logan has backed me into a corner and he's dragging you down with him. I can stop him. I will stop him, but I need to know whose side you are on when I do." Bella looked at the documents, then up at me. The blind loyalty that had clouded her eyes for years was gone, replaced by a devastating, heartbroken clarity. She wiped her face, her jaw setting into a hard line that looked incredibly like our mother's. "What do we do?" Bella asked, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "We go to Thanksgiving dinner," I replied, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across my face. "And we let Uncle Logan give thanks for everything he is about to lose." Thanksgiving Day arrived with a bitter, biting chill in the air, the sky a bruised, heavy gray that threatened snow. For the first time in a decade, I didn't spend the morning agonizing over how much emotional armor I would need to survive the holiday. Instead, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, carefully smoothing down the skirt of a remarkably plain, charcoal gray wool dress. It was entirely unremarkable, purchased years ago from a mid-tier department store, and exactly the kind of garment Aunt Margaret despised. I paired it with my scuffed black boots and a simple silver chain. Today was not about dressing for success. It was about dressing for the role they expected, right up until the curtain fell. Bella picked me up at noon. When I slid into the passenger seat of her car, the silence between us wasn't strained. It was loaded, vibrating with the shared knowledge of the explosive truth resting in the leather satchel on my lap. "Are you ready for this?" Bella asked softly, keeping her eyes on the road as we navigated toward the affluent, gated community where Logan and Margaret resided. "I have been ready for this for 10 years, I replied, my voice calm, anchored by a deep, unwavering certainty. "You just follow my lead. Do not let them make you doubt what you saw in those documents." We pulled into the sweeping, circular driveway of Logan's sprawling faux Tuscan mansion. The sheer audacity of the house, the towering stone columns, the perfectly manicured hedges, the oversized fountain bubbling in the center, made my blood boil anew. Every brick, every blade of grass was financed by lies and unpaid debts, while they sat in judgment of my rattling Honda. We walked through the massive double doors, immediately assaulted by the oppressive heat of the house and the overwhelming scent of roasting turkey, heavy perfumes, and expensive, burning firewood. The entryway was buzzing. Logan had invited several of his business associates and a few distant, wealthy cousins to ensure he had a proper audience for his grandstanding. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence." Aunt Margaret's shrill voice cut through the low hum of conversation. She glided toward us, holding a crystal goblet of champagne, her eyes sweeping over my plain gray dress with undisguised revulsion. "Adeline, I am frankly shocked you showed up after that little stunt you pulled at the house the other day. I suppose the promise of a free, hot meal was simply too much for you to pass up. Bella, darling, come away, let's get you a drink." "I'm fine right here, Margaret," Bella said, her voice surprisingly steady, though I could see her knuckles turning white as she gripped her purse. Margaret blinked, clearly taken aback by the subtle defiance, but before she could formulate a venomous reply, Uncle Logan boomed from the doorway of the formal dining room. "Let her be, Margaret," Logan called out, holding a glass of amber liquid, his face already flushed with alcohol and arrogance. He wore a velvet smoking jacket that looked utterly ridiculous. "It is a holiday, after all. We must practice charity. Though, looking at that dress, Adeline, I imagine you'll probably ask for leftovers to take back to your little apartment. Make sure the kitchen staff wraps up the bones for soup." A chorus of polite, uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the gathered guests. This was their dynamic. This was the role I was meant to play. The pathetic, impoverished niece, existing only to highlight their magnificent success. I looked directly into Logan's smug, flushed face, and I just laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a forced, polite chuckle. It was a genuine, bright, ringing laugh of pure, unadulterated amusement. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged room, entirely out of place, causing the chuckles of the guests to abruptly die in their THR. "Oates," Logan's smile faltered, his brow furrowing in confusion and immediate irritation. "Is something funny, Adeline?" he snapped, his tone darkening. Before I could answer, the heavy brass knocker on the front door sounded. Bella took a sharp breath. "That's Theo," Bella said, her voice tight. "I'll get it." She walked to the door and pulled it open. A tall, sharply dressed young man in his late 20s stepped inside, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. He had the nervous, eager energy of a man walking into a high-stakes interview, desperate to impress the people who held the keys to his future. "Theo, welcome, welcome," Logan bellowed, instantly stepping forward, slapping on his most jovial, commanding face. He reached out to pump the young man's hand. "So glad you could make it to our humble home. Come in, let me introduce you to the family. I was just telling some of my associates about your little data compression project." Theo smiled nervously, shaking Logan's hand. "Thank you so much for having me, sir. It's an honor. And thank you again for the introductions you promised. It means the world to my company." "Think nothing of it, my boy," Logan puffed out his chest, gesturing grandly to the room. "When you run in the circles I do, making a $2 million connection is as simple as making a phone call. Now, let me introduce you to the rest of the clan. This is my wife, Margaret, and this is Bella's older sister, Adeline. We try to include her when we can." Theo turned his head, a polite, prepared smile on his face, ready to greet the unremarkable sister he had undoubtedly been warned about. His eyes landed on me, standing quietly by the archway in my plain gray dress. The polite smile vanished instantly. All the color rapidly drained from Theo's face, leaving him ashen and terrified. His jaw slackened. The bottle of wine in his hand trembled so violently it clinked against his watch. He completely ignored Logan's extended hand, his gaze locked onto my face with a look of absolute, unmitigated panic. "Theo," Bella asked, playing her part perfectly, "is everything okay?" Theo didn't answer her. He took a stumbling step backward, physically recoiling as if he had just walked into a lion's den. He fumbled frantically in his coat pocket, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped his phone. He pulled it out, his thumb desperately swiping at the screen, staring at it, and then staring back at me. "That's her," Theo whispered, the words barely carrying over the sudden, heavy silence of the room. He looked at Logan, his eyes wide with betrayal and confusion. You said you knew the CEO of Apex Ventures. You said you were going to introduce me to the board." "I am, Theo, I am," Logan said, his voice laced with confusion, his eyes darting between the terrified young man and me. "I have a very close relationship with their primary partners. What is the matter with you?" "No, you don't," Theo said, his voice rising in panic. He pointed a trembling finger directly at me. "That is Adeline Mitchell. She is Apex Ventures. She is the sole founding partner. I have a pitch meeting with her investment committee on Monday morning. I've been studying her corporate profile for 6 months." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating vacuum that sucked the air out of the grand foyer. Aunt Margaret, who had been lifting her crystal goblet to take a sip of champagne, froze. Her eyes went impossibly wide, staring at me as if I had just sprouted a second head. Her fingers went slack. The goblet slipped from her grasp, shattering violently against the marble floor, sending a spray of expensive champagne and shattered crystal across the Italian tiles. What is he talking about?" Margaret stammered, her voice a reedy, thin whisper. Logan's face transitioned from deep red to a sickly, pale gray. "This is a mistake," he sputtered, turning to Theo. "She is an IT desk worker. She fixes broken keyboards at a local hospital. You are mistaken, son." "I don't make mistakes about the people who control my industry," Theo shot back, his fear morphing into defensive anger. "Her photograph is in the private registry. She funded the logistics algorithm buyout 3 years ago. You lied to me, Logan. You made me sign away 15% of my company for an introduction to a woman standing in your own hallway, a woman you just insulted." "Let me clear this up," I said, my voice ringing out with a cold, absolute authority that I had hidden for a decade. I walked slowly into the center of the room, my boots crunching over the broken glass of Margaret's dropped drink. I opened my leather satchel and pulled out the thick manila folder. I didn't look at the guests. I looked directly into Uncle Logan's terrified, shrinking eyes. "Theo is absolutely correct," I stated, my words precise and piercing. "I am the founder of Apex Ventures, and Logan Mitchell has absolutely no connection to my firm. In fact, Logan Mitchell has no connection to any firm because he is functionally bankrupt." I pulled the first document from the folder and held it up. "This is a notice of default. Logan, you have been parading around this mansion, pretending to be a titan of industry, while quietly dodging 6 active IRS tax liens. You are broke. You have been broke for 5 years." "Shut up," Logan roared, a desperate, animalistic sound, lunging forward to grab the papers. I sidestepped him effortlessly, and Theo moved to block him, suddenly realizing the danger he had been in. "And the worst part, Logan," I continued, my voice echoing off the high ceilings, "is that you don't even own this house. You defaulted on your mortgage 5 years ago. A private trust bought that debt from your lender to save you from immediate foreclosure. Did you ever bother to look up the primary stakeholder of the Oakfield Trust?" Logan stopped dead in his tracks. He began to hyperventilate, his chest heaving, his eyes darting frantically around the room at the shocked faces of his guests. "No," he whispered, a sound of total defeat. "No. I am the Oakfield Trust," I said softly, delivering the final, crushing blow. "I own your debt, Logan. I own this house. And as of this morning, because you attempted to steal my parents' estate to fund your fraudulent extortion of this young man, my attorneys have filed the final foreclosure paperwork. You have 30 days to vacate my property." Bella, Margaret shrieked, tears of sheer humiliation streaming down her heavily powdered face. She reached a desperate hand out to my sister. "Bella, do not let her do this. She is insane. She is trying to destroy our family. Tell her to stop." Bella stood tall, stepping away from Margaret's grasping hand. She looked at the woman who had manipulated her for years, her expression a mix of pity and absolute disgust. "She isn't destroying the family, Margaret," Bella said, her voice clear and strong, entirely free of their toxic influence. "She is saving it from you. You used me. You lied to me about my sister to steal our home. I am revoking the power of attorney tomorrow morning. We are leaving." Bella walked over to me, standing firmly by my side. She looked at Theo, whose head was spinning with the revelations. "Thea, if you want a real investor, you talk to my sister, but we are leaving this house." I looked around the room one last time. The wealthy cousins were already quietly edging toward the coat closet, desperate to escape the blast radius of Logan's catastrophic humiliation. The feast sat untouched in the next room, a monument to a fraudulent life that had just collapsed into dust. "Happy Thanksgiving, Logan," I said quietly. I turned on my heel, my boots crunching over the glass one last time, and walked out the heavy front doors into the crisp, cold air, Bella and Theo following closely behind. The fallout from that Thanksgiving was absolute, definitive, and incredibly quiet on my end. I didn't need to yell, and I didn't need to gloat. The legal machinery I had set in motion did all the talking for me. True to my word, Marcus executed the foreclosure flawlessly. Within 30 days, Logan and Margaret were forced to pack up their ostentatious lives and vacate the sprawling mansion. Without the illusion of wealth to protect him, Logan's creditors descended like vultures. The IRS formally audited him, freezing his remaining, meager accounts. The high society friends Margaret had cultivated so desperately abandoned her overnight, refusing to return her calls or acknowledge her presence at the local country club, a membership they subsequently lost due to unpaid dues. They eventually moved into a small, cramped apartment in a neighboring, significantly less affluent town. I heard through the grapevine that Logan was trying to find work selling insurance, his days of pretending to be a private equity consultant permanently ended by the very public exposure of his frauds. As for Theo, the young man was profoundly shaken but incredibly grateful. I took my time reviewing his data compression pitch the following Monday. He was nervous, sitting across from me in my actual, sleek corporate boardroom, light years away from the dusty IT desk Logan had envisioned. But his tech was solid, his work ethic was undeniable, and his vision was clear. I didn't give him a free ride because he was dating my sister. I tore his business plan apart, made him rebuild it, and when I was satisfied, Apex Ventures fully funded his Series A round without the parasitic 15% fee Logan had tried to extort. But the most important resolution happened far away from boardrooms and legal offices. A few weeks before Christmas, Bella and I stood on the wraparound porch of our parents' Victorian home. The "for sale" signs had been permanently removed, chopped into pieces, and thrown in the trash. The legal injunctions protecting. The property were ironclad. The house belonged to us, safely secured in a new, impenetrable trust that we managed together. I had hired a crew to clean the place from top to bottom, removing the stale air and bringing life back into the old rooms. The scent of lavender polish was strong again, mixing with the smell of the fresh pine wreath we had just hung on the front door. Bella leaned against the wooden railing, looking out over the front lawn, a steaming mug of peppermint tea in her hands. The tension that had lived in her shoulders for years, the desperate need to perform for Margaret's approval, was completely gone. She looked relaxed, grounded, and truly happy. "I still can't believe you did it," Bella said softly, turning to look at me. 10 years, Adeline, you lived like you had nothing, you let them treat you like dirt, just to make sure they couldn't take this away from us." "They took our parents," I replied, wrapping my hands around my own warm mug, the winter air biting playfully at my cheeks. "I wasn't going to let them take our home, and I certainly wasn't going to let them take you." Bella reached out, wrapping her arm around my shoulders, pulling me into a tight, fierce hug. "I am so sorry I ever doubted you. I am so sorry I listened to them." "You were a kid, Bella," I said, resting my head against hers. "They were master manipulators. It's over now. The truth is out, the house is safe, and the trash took itself out." We stood there for a long time, watching the first light flurries of winter snow begin to drift down onto the driveway. The heavy, fading quilt of deception I had worn for so long was finally gone, replaced by the deep, resonant warmth of real security. I didn't have to hide my success anymore. I didn't have to endure their cruel jokes or toxic condescension. I had built an empire in the shadows, and when the time was right, I had used it to completely dismantle the people who tried to destroy my family. As I took a sip of my tea, looking at my sister smiling beside me, I knew that justice hadn't just been served, it had been masterfully engineered. And it tasted incredibly sweet.